Hi, I'm Ryan Szymanski, curator for Battleship New Jersey Museum and Memorial, and today we're going to talk about two of the most important American carrier aircraft of World War II. We're on board the USS Lexington in Corpus Christi, Texas, and in her hangar decks they have a pair of the aircraft that she would have carried during World War II. As a kid, I grew up loving fighter planes, but the U.S. Navy operated a couple different types from their carriers throughout the war, from the old Brewster Buffaloes, to the Wildcats and Hellcats, to the late war Corsairs. And while these planes are awesome to look at and were excellent during the war, especially as you get towards the Hellcats and Corsairs, they weren't so much of the war-winning weapon as the two we're going to talk about today, the BDDauntless and the TBM Avenger. Up until the invention of missiles, aircraft carriers carried three basic types of aircraft. Fighters, which would do combat air patrol and escort the bombers. Dive bombers, which were designed to carry a bomb and dive on their target, whether an enemy ship or a surface target. And torpedo bombers, which could use torpedoes for attacking ships at low altitude, or could be used as level bombers bombing enemy land targets. Perhaps the most iconic dive bomber of World War II is the BDDauntless, right here behind me. This one in particular is an BD-3, and it's painted up in early war paint scheme, which would have been used up through about the Battle of Coral Sea and would have probably been painted over by the time of Midway. Notice that it's got the American stripes and the early war star logo saying that it's an American aircraft, but that the rest of the plane is camouflaged. Unfortunately, the red paint on there sort of made the camouflage useless. So even though this is an iconic look, it didn't really work well, and it was replaced with more solid blue paint schemes later in the war. The red stripes on the tail made it very easy for enemy aircraft to line up shots on them, and the red circle in the middle of the American rondel led to some unfortunate incidents thinking that it was the red meatballs on the side of Japanese planes, even though the big white star is right there. So that ends up being deleted, and US planes get a very different rondel about midway through the war. The BDDauntless was started to be replaced near the end of the war by the SB-2C Helldiver, which had the nickname Son of a Bee, this is a family channel, Son of a Bee Second Class, because of its poor characteristics on landing, and it was a beast to fly. And so it never replaced the Dauntlesses fully, and it was significantly larger than them, so you could fit more Dauntlesses. An early war loadout for an aircraft carrier would be a single squadron of fighters, a single squadron of torpedo bombers, and two squadrons of dive bombers. One, the actual dive bombing squadron, and one, the scouting squadron. So that's why they are SBDs, Scout Bomber Dauntless. So it was aircraft like these that located the Japanese fleet at Coral Sea, and aircraft like these that were able to dive bomb the Japanese carriers at Coral Sea and Midway, turning the tide of the war. In the anti-ship role, they would carry a 1,000-pound armor-piercing bomb. It was moderately effective against armored battleships, but deadly effective against aircraft carriers, particularly if they still had their aircraft on board. And so it was just a handful of squadrons of these Dauntlesses ambushing the Japanese carriers at Midway that turned the entire tide of the war. They would then go on to serve throughout the carrier battles around the Solomon Islands, and maybe most importantly, helped with softening up shore targets during the amphibious invasions throughout the war. They have a flight crew of 2, with a pilot and a radio operator / tail gunner. Probably the most iconic feature of the Dauntless is the dive brake on the underside, the thing with all the perforated holes in it. because these would be doing such a steep dive, when they were going to pull up, they would have to pop that flap to bleed off some of their speed so they could pull up as they dropped the bomb. The other most important aircraft was the Grumman TBF Avenger. This is a torpedo bomber which has an enclosed bomb bay which allows it to carry either torpedoes for anti-ship work or bombs for use on other targets. It can even carry depth charges and be used to hunt submarines. The Avenger is significantly larger than the Dauntless or the other fighter planes it would have operated with, and has a crew of 3 people, including a pilot, a radio operator who could man a 20mm gun underneath of the plane, and a tail gunner who operates a ball turret like in a heavy bomber. The Avenger first flew in December of 1941, shortly after the attack on Pearl Harbor, and its first combat mission was when 6 early production aircraft were sent to Midway Atoll to help defend during the attack. 5 of these 6 aircraft were shot down attacking the Japanese carriers. Afterwards, it became known as the Avenger. Throughout the war, Avengers accounted for a number of Japanese warships and again supported troops ashore. The most famous Avenger pilot was probably George Herbert Walker Bush, who flew one of these aircraft during World War II and was even shot down in action and saved by an American submarine. Whether she was hunting German U-boats in the Atlantic, launching off of escort carriers, or fighting the Imperial Japanese Navy in the Pacific from full fleet carriers, the Grumman Avenger made huge contributions to the American war effort in World War II and ended the career of torpedo bombers on aircraft carriers, basically. While more modern planes were developed, none were ever used to the extent of the Avenger. So what's your favorite type of aircraft? Let us know in the comments section down below. I love Dauntlesses, Avengers, Corsairs, but by far my favorite is the Hellcat. What type of aircraft do you think contributed the most to World War II? I think the naval air war in the Pacific was the most important, and I think the fact that the Grumman F-6F Hellcat contributed to 75% of Japanese aircraft shot down in that war makes her the most important. But let me know your thoughts in the comments section down below. Battleship New Jersey receives operating support from the New Jersey Department of State and also from a number of other businesses and individuals like yourselves. If you would like to support the restoration of some unique and amazing war aircraft, check out the donate button in the link below for USS Lexington in Corpus Christi. Donating to support the ship helps support the restoration of the aircraft on board. You can support Battleship New Jersey by liking, sharing, and subscribing so more people find out about our channel and our museum. Thanks for watching.